Dear learners, I'm Christina Georgy. I welcome you to my session on modernist poetry. So, in our previous session, we discussed the basic aspects related to a very renowned modernist poet named W.B.Yeats. So, today we'll discuss one of the most celebrated and discussed poems of W.B. Yeats, which is titled The Second Coming. Dear learners, let me remind you that we have seen an overview of this poem with specific focus on the biblical and historical aspects in our previous session. This session would undoubtedly be a continuation of the last session. Hence, if you have not listened to that, it would be great and helpful for you if you could go refer to that and come back.
Moving on to the poem as such, The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. Remember, you need to be familiar with the lines considering. Moving on to the poem as such, The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. The time constraints of a counseling session, I'm not reading out the lines. Nevertheless, you please be familiar, for there will be annotation questions. Just remember that this poem is written in 2 stanzas and in blank verse. As your third year students, I suppose you must be having some idea regarding how to critically appreciate a poem and how to analyze its structure. So if you're not so familiar, please make sure that you work on those aspects. Now I'll help you with the critical summary of the poem. Before that, there are some essential aspects that you need to remember. It would be great if you could study the year of publication. This particular poem, The Second Coming, is written in the year 1919 and it is published in many journals. They include The Nation and The Dial in November 1920, and later this work was published in Yeats' own collection titled Michael Robarts and the Dancer in the year 1921. So Yeats wrote this particular poem for a reason. That is, at the time of working on this poem, there was this World War I happening. And remember, World War I had caused a lot of suffering and death. And lots of people, millions of people suffered because of this World War. So we can say that W.B. Yeats wrote the poem to coincide with the end of World War I. Remember the timeline, 1914 to 1918. And this World War I had caused suffering and death, torture, hunger and disillusionment to millions of people. The First World War had let loose anarchy in the world. That is, so during the war, bombs were dropped and many thousands of innocent people were killed, which made people think that the time had come for the end of the world. So it was total destruction happening, and the war proved catastrophic, almost signaling the end of the world, and people began to wait for relief from cruel happenings. This word is important, catastrophic. Catastrophe is a word that denotes total destruction. So the reason why we were describing the consequences of the World War I was to find similarity with a situation mentioned in the Holy Bible. That is, all these aspects and the situation parallels the waiting of those who had earlier witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus and had waited for his promised second coming. That is the second coming of Jesus to earth as revealed in the book of Revelation, which is part of the New Testament of the Holy Bible. So in the New Testament, it is stated that the second coming would happen at the end of a catastrophic war, and that the Savior, that is Jesus, would arrive and take all devout people to a joyous life in heaven. So the apocalyptic prediction of the collapse of civilization as revealed in the book of Revelation seemed truly prophetic in the context of the deadly World War. So it is mentioned in the study material that the situation that prevailed after the World War could more or less be related to the situation that is mentioned in the Holy Bible, where the devotees could expect the second coming of Jesus Christ. We studied, or rather we already know the first coming of Jesus Christ. Anybody who's familiar with the Holy Bible would know that Jesus Christ came to earth, and he had been crucified for the sins of the people of earth, and thereafter he resurrected, and it was mentioned in the Holy Bible that there would happen a second coming, and that all devotees can actually wait for the second coming, and the second coming would happen at the end of a catastrophic war. So after this World War I, people began to think that this could be the right moment, or this could be the catastrophic war mentioned in the Bible, or this could be the end of the world. It was predicted that 2020 would be the end of the world, and there were predictions that Corona could take away the entire civilization. Such predictions were there. Likewise, those times people used to have this belief in mind. So as I mentioned, there is some amount of significance attributed to the title of this particular poem, and the New Testament made many Christians long for Jesus' return to the world a second time as their Savior. So this concept of time span is revealed by the title with 3 words: the second coming. So here lies the significance of this particular title. We already looked at the parallels between World War I, the catastrophe, and the prophetic revelation in the book of Revelation of the Holy Bible. Just as Christ's earlier arrival in the world was for saving men and women from their sins and punishment, in the same way the poet feels the second coming of Jesus will be to save mankind from total annihilation, as evidenced in the First World War. So this is very important. This falls under section 13.4, second paragraph, last line. Make sure that you write these parallels as mentioned in your study material. On a very first reading, this particular poem is quite not very easy to understand, especially because of its shocking imagery and obscurity. Once the images are well explained, it is easy to apprehend the theme of the poem. To state it in simple terms, this poem is a lament for the death of the old world and an expression of hope and expectation of a possible rebirth of a new one. You need to make sure that you mention that the poem draws upon the biblical symbolism of the apocalypse and the second coming of Christ to make the point. We have already discussed what symbolism is. Here it is the biblical symbolism that has come into play. The poem is deeply pessimistic for the second coming, since it is only an event that people desire, where people think there will be light. Given the reality of the catastrophic war, only darkness remains. So this is in the minds of the people, hence the overall tone is quite pessimistic. Pessimism would be the opposite of optimism. It's negative. Pessimistic means negative in nature. Okay, lack of hope maybe. And yet, beloved, that history is cyclical, and this poem Second Coming, as I mentioned, a 2-stanza poem in blank verse with its imagery of swirling chaos, terror, prophecies, and others. Critics who commented on this poem associated this particular poem with various contemporary calamities. What do you mean by the term contemporary? Relating to those times, the calamities that were prevalent during those times, such as the Easter Rising. See, this is the background for Yeats' poem Easter 1916. If anybody is interested, you may read that. I know nobody will be because of the lack of time. Your TE is soon approaching. Then another aspect is the Russian Revolution of 1917, the rise of fascism, and even the political decay of Eastern Europe. All such aspects are mentioned in glossary right after the main aspects mentioned in this study material. Eastern Europe. All such aspects are mentioned in glossary right after the main aspects mentioned in this study material. Glossary would be section 13.10. So those who are not clear about this may refer to the glossary. So are we okay so far? Did you understand what I was trying to put forth?
Before we move on to the analysis of this poem as such, let me remind you that we've already discussed the biblical and historical context of this particular poem in our previous lecture. So, I told you this poem is written in two stanzas. It's important to have a stanzic analysis. We have seen that the first stanza describes the catastrophic state of the people, whereas the second stanza is explicit about the biblical reference. So, before moving on to that, let me once again remind regarding the brief summary. That is, we see that flying round and round in a widening spiral, a falcon can no longer hear the call of its owner or the falconer as mentioned. Things are breaking down, pure destruction and lawlessness prevail. All the rituals of innocence have been swallowed by this tide, and the best people aren't motivated to act, but the worst people are impassioned and eager to act. And at this point, some kind of revelation has to happen soon. And the second coming itself must be close. Excitedly, the speaker exclaims, "The second coming." But just as the speaker says this, a vision comes to the speaker from the world's collective unconscious, and thereafter what happens is that the speaker sees a barren desert land where a creature with a man's head and a lion's body is coming to life. Its expression is like the sun, empty and without pity. Its legs are moving slowly, and all around it fly the shadows of disturbed desert birds. Everything becomes dark once again, but the speaker knows something important and new. That is, 2000 years of calmness have become irreversibly disrupted by the shaking of a cradle. So the speaker asks, "What beast, whose time has finally come, is dragging itself towards Bethlehem, where it will be born?" So these are the aspects that you see as part of section 13.6 in your textbook. It is not elaborated as much as I have described. Nevertheless, see, they have spoken about the biblical reference as part of the second stanza. I'll quote from the text. "Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming." So this is what exactly we spoke about. Excitedly, the speaker exclaims, "The second coming," because some kind of revelation has to happen soon, very soon. And it is a reference to the second coming. But the main idea in this poem can be elusive. What do you mean by that? That is, the main idea is quite difficult to find. The reason is because the poem ends with a complicated question that takes up the last 5 lines of the poem. I already elaborated on those aspects regarding the beast. Okay, I'll quote from the text. "The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its arc round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born." So these are the lines that we already spoke of. That is, once this beast is visible, everything becomes dark again. But the speaker knows of something. What is that? 2000 years of calmness have become disrupted again because of the shaking of a cradle. And the speaker asks this very important question: what beast is dragging itself towards Bethlehem, where it will be born? So, before we take up the analysis of these 5 lines in detail, it is important to have a discussion on the opening line. "Turning and turning in the widening gyre." It's the first opening line of this poem. There you see this term gyre, which is of great importance with respect to the writings, especially poems of W.B.Yeats. In general, this word gyre is used in oceanography and also in climatology. What does that mean? The term gyre means a vast circular system made up of ocean currents that spirals about a central point. In simple terms, you can think of something spiraling around a central point, round and round. So this word gyre simply means spiral that widens on going up or down. Spiral that widens on going up or down. Here the falcon is seen spinning round and round. See, this is reference to line 2. We saw that flying around and around in a widening spiral or gyre, a falcon can no longer hear the call of its owner or the falconer. So the falcon here symbolizes the hawk, which is the symbol of logic. We all know that falcon is a bird with big wings. So here it symbolizes the hawk, which is the symbol of logic, and thus the falcon represents man's intellect, while the falconer, the owner, stands for his strong feelings about the way the world has turned anarchic. Anarchy is a state of no control without a monarch or similar aspects. In text it is given that with no controlling rules or principles to give order. So this particular image, what is the image that we are referring to? The image of the falcon and the falconer. So this continues throughout the poem, and this is important imagery. Here in this poem, it can also stand for the interacting and conflicting eras. So according to W.B.Yeats, the poet, things fall apart and the center cannot hold. I got from text, where the center refers to the falconer and the things refer to the falcon. See? Yes, it's of great importance. Things Fall Apart reminds me of Chinua play's title. We study that as part of BEGE-144. So this term gyre is also significant in its reference to the cyclical nature of history. Remember that our poet believed in the theory that history consists of cycles, and that too, those cycles last towards 2000 years, that is last for 2000 years, and that repeats itself 2000 years and then continuing repeating the loop. So Yeats suggests that at the end of the 20th century the current cycle will end. Remember, he was a modernist poet and he used to write back then. Okay, it's something about the past that we are discussing. That is, according to him, at the end of the 20th century, the current cycle of this loop will end and the next one will be assured end. This will end and the new one will start. So the current cycle of 2000 years thus includes 1919. This year is significant. Why is that so? It is the year in which this poem, the second coming, is written. So this cycle has begun long time back when Jesus was born. So yet another biblical reference. So we must remember that a new era started with the birth of Jesus Christ. Remember AD BC? Yeah. So Yeats says that he and his generation are living in a chaotic time. It's a very destructive, drastic time, and world has gone through a terrible war. We discussed this matter before, and this war was widespread throughout Europe and has caused death of millions of innocent people. The catastrophe also we discussed. Now, looking back on the present times is characterized by chaos, our poet Yeats feels that the world has regressed to a point where, I quote, the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. We already discussed that the best people are motivated to act, but the worst people are impassioned and eager to act. Anarchy and confusion are prevailing all over the world post-war, which had degenerated into a bloodbath of innocent killings. Reference to war. So, in short, we can say that the first stanza of this poem presents a world devastated by war, inhumanity, and violence, and it sets the tone for the concluding stanza. That is the second stanza. So, these conditions have been prophesied or predicted in the Holy Bible. and the poet W.B.Yeats prepares us for the next stage, which according to him is not a sanguine expectation. In the sense, is very skeptical about it providing relief and ushering in a new era of peace and harmony. He doesn't believe that it is going to be all fine and good in a way. So the poet starts the second stanza with reference to the book of Revelation, and that is the last book of the Holy Bible, and repeats this idea of second coming in the next two lines. We already saw those lines. So soon the poet sees a big image of Spiritus Mundi. So Spiritus Mundi, this phrase means the spirit or the outlook or the social and cultural values characteristic of an era of human history. We understand that the poet is a bit troubled by visualizing it. That is, he is not sure whether it will provide relief. The reason is because Yeats pictures the spirit to be like a beast. Remember, we mentioned the beast is like a man lion with the head of a man and the body of a lion. Head of a man and body of a lion conjoined. So in this kind of avatar, it shows itself to be without compassion or empathy for humans. So the brutality of war had dried human feelings to such an extent that human beings are no longer capable of reacting to the sorrow and misery of fellow beings all round. So Yeats' lines remind us of the twin poems, The Lamb and the Tiger. See, you must have heard of The Lamb and the Tiger. These are poems by William Blake. So, in these companion poems, the poet contrasts God's creation of a fearsome tiger with that of a gentle lamb. That is, in these poems, the speaker is in awe, surprise of the fearsome qualities of a tiger, and rhetorically wonders. That is, he doesn't expect an answer but still wonders and questions whether the same creator could have also made the gentle lamb. So Jesus, in his first descent into the world, his first coming to the world, was like a gentle lamb. But according to W.B.Yeats, the second coming may be like that of a tiger. There lies the significance of this reference. This is how Yeats describes the coming of an apocalypse to ravish the world, no longer like a gentle lamb, but as a ferocious tiger. That is, the first coming was like a gentle lamb, but second coming could be like a ferocious tiger. This is what is intended here. So, moving on to the next 20 centuries of stony sleep, that line relates to the barbaric age prior to the advent of Christianity, before Christianity. Okay, so after the arrival of Jesus, the earlier 2000 years of barbarism has ended, so says Yeats. As the world was moving towards the end of the 20th century, once again barbarism has erupted. Now, as the Christian era is about to end, it is moving towards Bethlehem to be born. So these are the significance of these lines. And what is the significance of Bethlehem here? I suppose you know it's a place. Yes, it is the city of Jesus' birth. And the beast is slouching towards Bethlehem. Slouching in the sense, what does that mean? It means to trudge or to move lazily. It is not a gentle Jesus but a malevolent beast from the spirit world, Spiritus Mundi, that will now take birth at Bethlehem. This is what is explained as part of analysis in our study material. Regarding the Spiritus Mundi concept, you need to be familiar. The sight of Spiritus Mundi vanishes, and as we saw in the analysis, darkness drops again. So, a comment on the ending of the poem. The ending suggests that the wait for the promised relief that Jesus will be born when the world goes through such a catastrophic upheaval is quite crucial. In the sense, this time, Yeats is not very optimistic. He fears it is not going to be gentle, kind, and peace-loving Jesus to save mankind who will be born, but this time a rough beast that comes to punish the sinners and the wicked will be born. Remember, this is Yeats' interpretations, and it seems as though Yeats fears punishment and not pardon at the end of the 2000-year cycle. Remember, he was believing that it was about to end. Thinking of the next 2000-year cycle, which he calls the second coming, yet filled with pessimism, not optimism. He imagines a rough beast rising from the sand and desert and wonders what it is. But from the description and questions, it is clear that he anticipates nothing good can come in the next cycle. So, in short, the main idea then seems to be pessimism about the current age and even more pessimism about the future. So that's all regarding a detailed analysis of the poem as mentioned in our study material. See, our study is limited to the syllabus and study material, just remember that. And a quick mention regarding the symbolism in the poem. We've already discussed what symbolism is many a times. So with respect to this poem, we can identify that symbols are very many times used in this poem. It begins even with the title of the second coming. See, you must be having an idea that second coming is actually related to Bible. It is a phrase from the last book of the Holy Bible, the book of Revelation, to signify the coming of Jesus a second time. So, let's use the term Gaia related to his belief in the 20 or 2000-year cycle. So this is also a symbolism used. So we know that world in 1919, when poem was written, the year of poem's creation is slowly moving towards 2000, symbolic of the year of 2000 years after the death of Jesus. So Christian values taught by Jesus of love and peace, service, thankfulness, compassion, forgiveness and empathy all have been forgotten as evidenced in the world war. So our poet anticipates a new cycle to begin. But he does not hold any hope of God sending his son, but more likely a very ferocious version of it, a man lion to destroy wickedness. So that's all regarding the symbolist aspect of the poem. Make sure that you have a detailed understanding. In this session, we discussed W.B. Yeats' poem The Second Coming in detail. In our previous session, we looked at the life and works and the biblical aspects and more important aspects that were to be discussed. Here, we discussed the detailed analysis, symbolism, and other aspects. So, I suppose you understood the poem. This is a modernist poem and is very crucial to your exam preparation. I suppose I made it clear to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll meet again with yet another important poem, which is another modernist poetry by the modernist writer T.S. Eliot. The poem is titled The Journey of the Magi.